The views and opinions expressed on the Craig L. Hayes Show do not necessarily reflect those of Westgate Resort ownership or management. And now, on with the show.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Get your copies while they last. Stop the presses.
And now for something completely different.
Are you ready for a little truth? Are we not entertained? Wisdom is the proper use of knowledge and experience. There are no safe spaces here. The truth shall make you free. It's showtime! So you want the truth, but can you handle the truth? Well, here's another fine mess you've gotten us into. Now that's entertainment. Enlighten me a little. What you say is quite logical. And what did we learn? Prepare yourself for a little sensory overload. I came here for the truth. 47 years ago, stand by the roll show intro. Roll show intro in 3, 2, 1, go.
This is the Craig L. Hayes Show.
Hello, America, family, friends, and listeners all around this planet we call home. This is the Craig L. Hayes Show, and I am Craig L. Hayes. Today is the 25th of October, 2024, and we're going to continue on our adventure and our exploration of what goes on behind the scenes in show business, especially here in Las Vegas, because that's the one I'm most familiar with. But we have people that come all over from the country, around the world, and work here in Las Vegas and perform. But this is a show dedicated to the people who work behind the scenes and make the show happen every day. We are coming to you, basically live, recording this from the Westgate Resort here in Las Vegas, Nevada. And we're in Elvis Presley's dressing room in the basement of the International Theater, the room that was built for Elvis Presley. And I would like to thank again Cammie Christensen, Don Rawl, and John Peer for making this possible for me to do this podcast from this room. It's a legendary room, and I am so grateful and honored by being allowed to do it from the room that I worked in for 30 years. So today is going to be a podcast about wardrobe. We had talked to Gail Brumbaugh, who's the head wardrobe here at the Westgate Resort, has been doing that for over 30 years. Today, we're going to talk to Shawn Wayne. That's his name. I know him as another name. He's got his legal name. He's got his Shawn Wayne is his performer name, and I keep forgetting that. Sorry about that, guy.
No problem.
I never call you that, so I don't know. I keep on going. I got just a blank. I went, he just told me 2 seconds ago. So anyhow, sorry about that. And we're going to continue on with that discussion. And he has been in wardrobe for many years here in Las Vegas, and he's a performer. He's an artist. He does all kinds of things. And we're going to talk to him about his experiences. So welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Craig. Thrilled to be in the old Elvis showroom and Elvis's dressing room.
Yeah. Isn't this a great room to do this in? I am so honored that they let me do this in this room, in Elvis's dressing room. It's like, how many people out there can say they have a podcast from Elvis's dressing room?
And they didn't blow it up.
Yeah, and they didn't blow this building up. So thankful. But I am so grateful. And but what we're going to do here is we're going to talk a little bit about your past, how you got into show business, how you got into performing, how you got into the world of entertainment that we work in. From your early childhood and coming forward, where you came from, et cetera, like that. And then we'll talk about your experiences here in Las Vegas, because you've been here quite a while, too. So Right now, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm originally from Carnation, Washington, a very small town about 40 miles east of Seattle. And we're way out in the sticks, just past Redmond and Bellevue, where Bill Gates and all of the silicone people built all of the Microsoft and all of the big tech corporations all sprang out of basements back in the very early 80s. And it just, I don't know, my sister and I, all of our lives, were interested in show business. And, Vegas just kept popping up on the map. I would, as a child, listening to Red Fox's albums, and I saw on the cover of the record, oh, he's live in Vegas. I thought, oh, God, Vegas, that sounds great. And several years later, my mom's sister, my favorite aunt, said, oh, we're going to Vegas to see Elvis. And I thought, oh, Elvis. She said, oh, yeah, we've been waiting forever for this. So sure enough, she came down and saw Elvis, and she came back raving about Vegas and all the celebrities that performed on the famous strip, and she raved about the Elvis concert. And I thought, boy, this is odd. Vegas just keeps popping up. And one day I was reading Rolling Stone magazine, and I saw a picture of a showgirl, and she was knelt down on the freeway with a sign outside of town, and it said, gotta get to Vegas. And it had a huge impression on me as a teenager. It was just one more thing. I just kept hearing Vegas.
Sign, literally a sign of a sign.
It was another sign. And then when the hit TV show Vegas with Dan Tana and the Red Thunderbird came out, I said, oh, that's it. I got to get to Vegas. Ironically, I wound up meeting the showgirl who I saw posing with the sign, "Gotta get to Vegas," years later.
Wow.
It was really quite amazing, some of the stuff that happened to me over the years that took place between, moving there and moving here. And it took a couple of tries to actually get here. Came down and auditioned for a show and didn't get the part, and went back and told my sister, "Oh yeah, we gotta move to Vegas. We gotta move to Vegas." And she said, "Oh, me and our best friend, we're gonna move to Atlantic City. Let's all move to Atlantic City." I said, "I don't want to move to Atlantic City. I've got this thing for Vegas." And so I talked them out of it, and they decided, "Yeah, let's move to Vegas." So that was our big plan, and we saved money and hawked everything we had, and worked as hard as we could, and tried to save money, and work up a kitty to get down here. And well, when the smoke cleared, we made it, but we didn't really have any job prospects when we got here. It was just a leftover unemployment claim to squeak by, and it was, we couldn't figure out how to crack the entertainment scene. Couldn't figure out how would you get a job in one of these hotels and work backstage with the big shows. And it was a question. I mean, we didn't know who to ask, who to call. It was
Well, it was quite the leap of faith.
it was.
Wow.
And it was. People thought we were crazy. I worked a string of jobs. Back home, growing up in high school. Everything from medical guinea pig market research. I worked in a fiberglass plant. I was a temporary at a Kelly Girl agency. I worked at a candy factory. It was exhausting line of jobs prior to this, and eventually did wind up going to beauty school and worked in the salon as a cosmetologist, hairdresser for about 4 years. And ironically, just as I was building up a clientele, that's when we got the big bug and got bitten. Gotta get to Vegas. So dropped everything and moved down here. Like I said, fingers crossed. It was talk about a leap of faith.
Yeah. So what did you have other jobs you were doing down here trying to, break into the business per se, as we call it?
Well, not particularly. We thought, well, there's got to be jobs at the hotel scene. And so we thought, well, worst comes to worst, I can go get a job as a dishwasher, maybe housekeeping, anything just to get a feel of the town and figure out where. That's the first thing I ask people when I moved down here on the bus. Where do normal people live? All I saw was the strip. And I didn't really, you just couldn't get your bearings. Like, where is the residential area? Where's the family? And then come to find out, we have one of the fifth largest school districts in the country. So it was, you didn't know what was, I never guessed what was happening off of that strip until I
Yeah.
settled and kind of got my bearings, with the town. But it was an exciting time. It was 1987, and it was kind of the end of the mob scene, and the locals were always grumbling that they couldn't get any more comp tickets, and the buffets were going up, and I thought, yeah, I guess I missed the golden age, but
You missed the mob time, and you got here when there was the corporate, time, and things did change. They really did. This funny thing you said that is where do normal people live? Yeah, yeah. I was born and raised here, so I've been here forever, and I remember going to concerts when I was younger, and guys that were performing would sit there and go, "Oh, I didn't think people actually lived here. I thought everybody just lived in the hotels," as the performers. And I'm like, "Really? Okay." We were like, we're just like a normal city. We just have these big casinos here that people come and spend their money. What's
well, and it was, I mean, there were barely 750,000 people at the time in 86, 87, and you now I mean,
pushing 3 million
pushing
now?
3 million, and I mean, I remember. I mean, back then there was nothing between the casinos. There were big, huge, empty spaces between every casino.
Yeah, we've talked about that with other people. They go, "We remember you had to walk, all forever between the casinos because there was all this vacant desert land between them." It's like, yeah, I remember that too.
Well, when you see the every square inch is taken now. There's not. You couldn't. When I see all the old vintage photos, I think, God, this is incredible. That the place is just the last 30 years, it has just turned into a mecca of sports and all kinds of entertainment.
Yeah.
And it's really amazing the way the town has turned.
So and I agree with you. It's from when I was a kid, I graduated in '80, and it was about 250,000. So just within 5-6 years, it had gone up, 400,000 people. But I remember the '80s was a time where everybody was just coming to Vegas, and it just kept on going and going, and it hasn't stopped. It doesn't seem. But when you did finally, what was it you really wanted to do? You wanted to be in Vegas.
Well,
you were here.
My sister and I wanted to be showgirls, so we thought, oh, let's go audition for all the shows. At the time, there were a lot of little production shows that used topless dancers, and then of course you had several of the big shows were still in production, and there were a couple of female impersonator reviews in town. Kenny Kerr had his big show at the Silver Slipper.
Boylesque, yeah.
They had just opened. Norbert Allman had just opened up Evening at La Cage at the Riviera. So I thought, oh well, I'll try out for the shows, and I was a little green and didn't get it, and luckily, my sister got right into a show. She got into the Crazy Girls, and that kind of kicked off our hope that we might actually be able to do some stuff on that side of the curtain. But in the meantime, I struggled, and I worked as a dishwasher over at the old Mardi Gras Inn on Paradise Road in the little coffee shop there. And when I look back at my paychecks from that period, I think I was clearing about $225 for 2 weeks. Talk about scraping by.
Yeah, really.
But, as luck would have it, we moved down here with a friend who was a singer, and she wanted to audition for Legends in Concert. So she got all dolled up like Diana Ross, and we were out on Koval Road over by the old, well, now it's the convention center, the Sands. But there was nothing there but a vacant lot. So she was posing away on the side of the street, and I was shooting the photos because I loved doing photography back in the day. And all of a sudden, this guy comes flying down the street in a 55 Chevy, slams on the brakes, pulls a U-turn. He says, "What are you guys doing?" We said, "We're trying to get in we're trying to get jobs. We're trying to get in the shows. We don't know who to ask, about how would you go about either one. Is there a place that is there a way to audition for things, or is there, what's going on?" He said, "Oh, you got to go to the union. You got to go to the IATSE union." I said, "Oh, where's the union?" He said, "It's on Valley View." We didn't have a car. So the next day I walked all the way over there in the blazing hot sun. I signed up at the hall and waited to get that first call because Once you get dispatched, then you can start, working and hopefully eventually become a member and, work all of the projects in town that fall under the umbrella of IATSE. And it just so happened this particular guy was a stagehand at Jubilee over at Bally's. And so he put in a good word for us. And I got my first call at Jubilee in September of 1988. And that was it. I was there for 26 years until the final curtain fell in 2016.
Wow.
And it was
That's a good run.
amazing run. And the good thing was in the beginning, I was temp. I mean, I was a temp because the hotel didn't really hire employees per se. Everyone was just kind of dispatched through the hotel. There were a few house positions, but rare back then. And so I lucked out, and I did get into a show, which was up in Wendover, right on the state line of Utah. And so I was able to, leave and go do the show for several months and then come back and just, sign back into the hall. And I would undoubtedly get dispatched right back to Bally's because they were always desperate for people because they had a cast of 85 people. And it was a lot of dressing. There were probably 18 dressers dressing the show for the whole cast. And it was a very busy production, and it ran 6 nights a week, and you had one day off, but you would never, it was no, you worked every holiday. If the holiday fell on your day off, they'd change your day off. So you got used to, I just got so hooked on the being backstage and hearing the music start and running through the show, and you memorize all the songs, and you'd become friends with a lot of the performers. And so it was kind of like a home away from home. When we got down into the basement, we felt like we were just like one big family. And it was an exciting time to be able to be around all of the show people. And then, of course, you start hearing, how you get auditions. And there just happened to be a special paper that everyone circulated backstage called the Dirt Alert.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And
Yeah.
so every time we'd see an audition in the Dirt Alert, we'd, call them up and, send out our headshots or try and call in a favor and see if we knew anybody in the cast, someone that had already been cast in the show, and try and, write on their skirt tails to get in.
Yeah.
You'd try anything in show business. But it's luckily, like I said, it all worked out, but it wasn't overnight. I struggled that whole year before I finally got that first call, and boy, that was it.
But that's the main thing. Go back to Wendover. What show were you doing up in Wendover? Because talking about a place that has almost nothing going on other than come on, drop your nickels and quarters in some slot machines. What kind of show?
Well, it was a female impersonation show,
Okay.
and the thing about Wendover that a lot of people didn't realize at the time, I didn't know it until I got there. I kept thinking, how are we going to sell tickets in this little out of the way place? And the Utah's next door. It's basically Mormon, and you wouldn't really associate it with casinos, but a lot of the casinos were actually owned by Mormons that lived in Salt Lake. And so, you'd get a lot of people coming up over the weekend to watch the shows and to gamble. And I used just to joke and say, they don't think God can see over the state line.
It's a good line. Good line.
Sunday morning, they'd race back over the line to go to church. But
Yeah.
the good news was there was an Air Force base there because, we actually, that's where we had the bomb that we eventually dropped on Hiroshima, was launched out of Wendover. I'm not sure if they built it there, but that was where it actually originated from. And after the war was over and everything, the base, closed up, and there was still a runway there. Well, the hotels, the State Line and the hotel I was in, they purchased 747s, and they flew all their customers in every night from all over the country. They'd give me a map every night, and that would give me 2 locations where, this coming in from Texas, it's coming in from, Green Bay or wherever the 2 flights were from that particular night. And so they kept the casino full of customers every night of the week. We actually had 4 planes that would come in on Friday and Saturday. So then we would really be packed. So it was really, you always had a built-in audience. It was the rare event when, if it was really bad weather and the plane couldn't land, then you might be in trouble. Your comedy monologue's not going to go over so hot with 4 people in the crowd. But that was a rare event, thank God.
Yeah.
So,
So just what characters? Because everybody that I've ever worked with in the female impersonator, also known drag queen shows, whatever you want to call them, they do certain couple characters, and some of them are so good you go, that is the person, and yeah, I mean they get so good at it,
Yeah, well, Evening at La Cage at the Riviera was notorious for this, and they would have, most of the guys would only do 1 character. Some of them would do 2, but they had that 1 character that they really did, and mine turned out to be, believe it or not, I think I'm the only female impersonator in the country that did Suzanne Summers in their nightclub act.
Wow, yeah. That's one I never saw.
Well,
That's one I haven't seen done in any of them.
Well, it was a fluke of luck because Suzanne had performed in the sister production of Jubilee called Hello Hollywood up in Reno.
Okay.
And so I knew the sound people, and they had some of her music. So we were able to get some of her live vocals and numbers from the show up there because it had closed right around that specific time. So that was one of my characters. I did Suzanne Summers. I did Marilyn Monroe. Probably one of my best look-alike characters wound up being Anne Margaret, which I had never even thought of doing Anne Margaret. And one day my producer said, we need to start working on a second show so that when the customers come in on Friday night, we can have 2 different shows, and they can watch one, go gamble, drink, have dinner, come back and watch a completely different show.
Yeah.
So they said,
That's a good idea. That's actually pretty smart.
It was. So they said, we want you to do Anne Margaret. And, this is before video, so I had never actually seen videos of Anne Margaret perform. I mean, I knew she had a record or 2 that you might be able to latch onto one of her songs, but it wasn't like, if they're the ones that thought of it. And it turned out to be, like I said, one of my best characters. And eventually we did so much up there that we moved to Elko, which is down probably 100 miles toward Reno. And then I added a couple more characters. I did Cher. I did Dana Carvey's famous church lady. We had a church chat. And so that was a lot of fun. But I was also the host and MC of the show, so I had to do a lot of jokes and banter in between the other numbers, and I got stretched a little thin because
that's carrying quite the load if you're trying to do all those characters.
Yeah. I would some shows I would do 3 different characters plus be the hostess.
The MC. Yeah, that's a little bit of a load on that. Hey, let's come back to this in the next episode here in just a few minutes. Believe it or not, we've already done 25 minutes.
Time flies.
Yeah, it flies when we're having some good times, and you are. So we're going to be back in just a few minutes, and we're going to continue this conversation.
This is the Craig L. Hayes Show.